Hi, I'm Chayale.
Hi, I'm Hindi. Welcome to Your Relationshift. Join in our conversation where we explore
The nuance and beauty of Torah's perspective on relationships. Hey, what's up?
Hey, great, thank God.
So we have a very relevant, relatable topic to bring to everyone today, which is when you are not feeling well. When you're under the weather, you get the flu, you got a cold, um,
You're
some
pregnant?
you're pregnant, um, you're compromised in some way, and in certain situations and in certain dynamics, that's a cause for tension, triggers, frustration. Um, so, meaning in some relationships, husbands will really shine in that context. Like it's an opportunity for them to really step up. And I've had women that it's actually helped them with receptivity, like
Yeah.
because it's introduced weakness and it's given their husbands an opportunity to give to them and they've received it. So that's great if it works out that way. But in a situation where for some reason your husband's not responding the way that you would like him to, and I would say even more than not responding, he's actually withdrawing. You feel like more distance, and then you're in this position where you feel like you're drowning and you don't feel well and you don't have support. So that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. Meaning if you're already feeling super vulnerable and susceptible and at the mercy of the elements, it doesn't really put you in such a good space mentally, physically, in general, right? It's hard. It's hard to be sick. It's tough. It's rough. It's painful, and especially if it's something that's lasting a long time. It's not just like a one day flu or something. Even I mean that too is hard. But in such a situation, it's very easy for that resentment, if it was surface level or not there at all, to just suddenly spike up because you're feeling down. You're feeling like a victim, right? You didn't choose to get sick. So it's hard. Yeah. So already you're starting in a place where you don't have your best foot forward.
Yeah, which I think is important to point out because a lot of what makes um, implementing relationship successful is what we would call like the proactivity, the ownership, like being on, like you're in a zone, you're focused, you're managing, you're regulating. And when we get sick, we're weakened. So it becomes a lot harder to access those tools and also self-care and things that like keep us sort of at like a level where we're able to show up the way that works. We lose our footing. So that really makes it harder.
Yeah. Yeah. So what happens is that all those external factors that help you kind of maintain that inner balance are more often than not removed. And what are you left with? Right? Like what are you left with to help yourself? You almost feel like, no, I need someone else to help me maintain some sort of inner balance, to
Mm.
help me feel okay. Like I can't get out of bed. I need someone to make supper. Who's going to pick up the kids? Like it all feels so out of control and out of your hands, and you don't have that self care in place. So it really pushes you to a place of feeling at the mercy, feeling like a victim. And it's almost like there's nothing that you could do to help get out of that mindset.
Right. So the helplessness feels genuine and it feels outside of you, which is something that we've spoken about, helplessness being a mindset. A woman who's sick, not feeling well, is like, it has nothing to do with my mindset. I'm genuinely helpless, right? I'm, stuck in my bed and I can't move. Um, and then outside of the like practicality of what you need, I think there's also an emotional need that comes up when we're not feeling well, which is how we want to be seen and how we want to be, like the type of compassion that we want or the empathy that we're looking for. Um, and I think for some women that feels very important and very significant. And maybe, let's say, if they're getting help, but they're not getting that empathy and that compassion along with the help, or they're getting neither. There's like, it can put you in a very needy place, and that is an automatic trigger for frustration, resentment, tension, potentially, getting into some sort of fight. So what would be an appropriate approach if I'm physically compromised and emotionally compromised because I'm physically compromised? So what do you want from me then? Right? Like, I just don't feel good and I need support and I'm not getting it. Like, how is this going to work?
Yeah. Yeah. There's an element there that I think is an important thing also to highlight where when a woman is sick, everything is now heightened, right? So imagine if, like you're saying, she's looking for some sort of compassion, she's looking for some sort of empathy. And what I would hear, right, in my mind would be, I don't usually ask for this, but like when I do, right, or when I'm sick, I really need this, right? So there's almost like this justified righteous indignation of, I could get along without this. Like I suffer along and I don't get the empathy or the acknowledgement or the love that I really want usually. But when I'm sick, that better be coming because I need it. I need that support, right? And an element of that, first of all, it just means that everything is much more energized, right? And this becomes a litmus test for your entire life. What I'm hearing is that she actually does need that empathy, love, support, acknowledgement always, but she kind of just plows through and lets it go. And then when she's sick, that's when she's really starting to demand it. But I would love to bring into this conversation of like the self awareness of what are your real desires in your whole relationship, because everything just gets magnified when you're sick. And it actually is an opportunity to look at yourself and say, oh, these are things that are really missing for me, but I'm only demanding them now. But really, it's something that I deeply want and should be working towards, like creating space for or expressing as a desire, but I'm just not doing it. And then it comes out really awkward when it's expressed when she's sick because it's so energized and it's so desperate and it's so needy, like you were saying.
Yeah, the maybe because this woman can't give herself permission to have needs, to express them, and it only feels justified to her when she's not feeling well. And that's where maybe the confusion comes in, because it's like all of a sudden she's needing a lot or wanting a lot, and it's like, where did that come from? And really what it came from is that she couldn't give herself permission to have wants and needs unless she's significantly compromised. I've heard women say, like, and maybe this connects, like this rolls into the next point, which is a woman will say, like, sometimes I want to get sick so that my husband will recognize me and give to me. And maybe even sometimes a woman, she's really honest with herself, is over exaggerating her circumstances because she feels like, again, this is my only way to get compassion, to get love, to get, like, being sick is what justifies my needs and my wants. So I have to, like, basically manipulate a little bit the situation. And then that backfires because, manipulation always backfires, but it's not honest. So even if the person that if your spouse doesn't fully know what's off, they for sure know that something was off, and then you get all upset, like, oh, you don't believe, you're not believing me, or you're not taking me seriously, and you kind of double down, and it's going to be a very vicious cycle of sort of a woman feeling like this was her only opportunity to get compassion and support and love and help, and it's not working. And like, how could that be? What kind of person am I married to is if I'm sick and they still can't show up for me?
Yeah, I hear that. So what I'm hearing you touch upon is like there's a truth element here where sometimes because a woman feels like she just needs to get some sort of response, she'll she'll make sure to really communicate to him how terrible things are, or how drastic things are, in order to justify to herself and also to finally express to him, because there hasn't been that kind of communication outside of her being sick. I'm kind of like also hearing, when a woman also says, maybe this is not directly related, but I'm hearing this where a woman will say, how come my husband never will actually listen to me unless I'm crying and falling apart? Right? It somewhat relates to that, where it's gotten to a point where she has worked up, or she's in such a vulnerable state that she's falling apart, and that's only when he's listened to her. And that's right, that's not such a healthy dynamic. We would obviously want something different where she's able, right? What's the ideal? Let's just talk about the ideal for a second. She expresses
Before you do the
desires.
ideal, I just want to conclude that point, which is relationships do get into that pattern where she has to fall apart to get acknowledged, to get love and support. And that's their routine, is that it goes and goes and goes and goes till she falls apart, falls apart emotionally or physically or both together. Then he acknowledges her, maybe even apologizes, and then they start the routine again. And if a relationship is in that pattern, what very often happens is after a few years of being in that pattern, she'll fall apart and he won't respond. And then things will really get chaotic, because like even that, I guess, technique or that dynamic will start to break down. And then you'll have a woman who said like, and I was crying and he didn't seem to care, or and I was sick in bed and he didn't seem to care. Like her one sort of tool in her toolbox to engage or connect deeply or get that love and compassion ends up starting to fail her. But yeah.
And the reason for that is because there's an element of truth to that that ring around that they've entered into, where it's true when a man sees a woman fall apart and when he sees her vulnerable, it awakens a protective element in a husband, right? That is true. She looks vulnerable right now. He wants to protect. These are both the natures of feminine versus masculine. And that's a good thing, right? That's beautiful about the masculine, and that's beautiful about the feminine. However, if it's weaponized, right, or if it's used in a way that we're trying to play on his nature and using it even a little bit out of context to manipulate, whether consciously or unconsciously, that would be a very big issue. And I would understand the mashpia resenting it and working up the gumption to just look away, which is deeply, deeply painful. If that is your experience, that is so, so painful, especially when, let's say, 98% of you really is crying, right? And 98% of you is really suffering and you are in bed. And then there's like maybe a 2% of you that's like, finally, he's going to look at me, right? So let's say, whatever, it doesn't really matter the percentages. We're not trying to say that women are manipulative, but we are trying to say that there is that nature at play, which sometimes we as women will lean on just because that could help us, right? It could be like somewhat of a technique to really impress upon him that he needs to help you right now. The problem with that is that there's another element of your femininity that you're totally not accessing, which is your desires, and how important your desires also are to your husband. And communicating your desires are so important to your femininity. And if that element is not a part of your experience or your relationship with your husband, so then the only communication that he's then hearing is the vulnerable one, the one where you're falling apart, the one where he feels like he's getting played, because and then what happens is then he doesn't feel like he's being successful at taking care of you and making sure that you're protected, because all he hears is the only feedback that he's getting is, once a month or once every 6 weeks, she falls apart. As opposed to the other element of mashpia mekabel, which is, I love seeing her desires. I love fulfilling her desires. I love seeing how happy she is. I love being there for her, not when she's just falling apart, but when she's also happy and taking ownership and excited about something. And I get to witness that part of her, that aspect of her as well. Right? So there's a play here. There's an interplay between the mashpia and mekabel dynamic where it's going awry.
Yeah. And I think that it's not about accusing anyone of being manipulative. It's a last resort for some people, and it comes from a desperation. And part of what you're saying is the rejection ends comes actually from a good place where there's an LCI in the rejection, which is like your husband's telling you like you're better than this. We don't need to resort to this. Like this is not this is this. It's almost like I'm gonna look away because you're exposing a part of yourself that isn't the real you, or doesn't express your true beauty or your true value. And if I keep responding, I'm feeding into your narrative that you're not really worthy of love and compassion unless you're falling apart. And I don't want to be a partner in that. I want to be a partner in seeing you thrive and be your best self. So just connected to what you were saying, right? He's wanting to see her flourishing, thriving, and partially maybe starting to reject this dynamic because it's keeping her stuck.
Hmm. Yeah, so I'm hearing like the client who will say, my husband like literally leaves the house if I'm not feeling well or if I'm throwing up, first stages of pregnancy. And it's like, what kind of husband does that? And a part of what that is could also be an element of like, it's hard for him to see her in pain. It's hard for him to see her suffering. There's an LCI in that too, but you're saying a much deeper LCI, which is if this dynamic has developed between them where there's an element of her trying to make it real to him that she really needs this. He needs to show up for her. He's kind of saying, I will, just don't do that, right? I'm here for you. I want to, and I'm not going to be told how to show up for you with that kind of energy. I've always been here for you. And so it almost looks like rejecting, but it's more like him trying to say, I will when you ask, not nicely, but ask in accordance with how much you're actually in pain or whatever's really coming up for you.
Yeah, and in a way that is self-respecting. Like
Hmm.
you don't have to be diminishing yourself to such extreme measures. It doesn't require you falling apart to elicit a response from me. Let's reset this dynamic where I can give to you from a space where you desire, and then everyone can thrive.
Right, right. So let's bring it all together here because we're bringing two separate situations, but there's definitely an underlying theme that comes up for both of them. So the woman who's sick and is not getting a response from her husband, the response that she wants, and the woman who says, my husband will only respond to me when I fall apart, when I completely demand, like the crying, the demanding, the all of that. What we're seeing at the crux of the issue is there's some LCIs that we could see there too. But what does have to happen, and that's why we're talking about it in a podcast. So hopefully, outside of one being sick, you could listen to this and start working on it. Is maybe there's a bigger element at play in your dynamic. Maybe we need to be talking about communication and about how you express yourself
And about
outside
your,
of when you're sick.
right, and your level of comfort with having needs and wants, and just as maybe the final puzzle piece, is that something that you know how to acknowledge within yourself? Do you know how to give yourself compassion? Do you know how to give yourself space? Do you know how to acknowledge what's a need, what's a want? Or are you desperate for somebody else to figure that out for you because you can't give that to yourself? And that's definitely something that we've explored, like I think in pieces in different contexts of where like we want other people to set boundaries for us, or we want other people to be like, no, that's too much for you, or like, oh, you must really be in pain. Like, am I able to acknowledge when I'm really in pain and what that pain is and how much space does it need and how much compassion does it need, and am I able to give that to myself, or do I just feel kind of lost in acknowledging my experience or my pain, physical or not, and then it puts me again in that like severe dependency of someone else needing to approve that this is something that deserves space, or like I deserve rest. I need the confirmation from outside of me that this is justified. And I think when we're looking for that justification outside of us and we don't get it, we get really frustrated. I need you, my husband, to justify that I'm not feeling well enough, and therefore you have to help me and step in. And his lack of response may be a way of communicating. The first person that you needs to give that to you is yourself.
Right. So there's some deep ownership there. I get that. Like, I've heard this a lot where, like, let's say another woman will show up for you and you're doing like this, data comparison between how your friend shows up for you when you're sick or when you're vulnerable, and the way your husband is showing up for you when you're sick and vulnerable. And you're taking her showing up for you, like bringing you the soup and the I don't know, the iced coffees and coming to sit by your bed and talk to you and hold your hand, and you're like, see, someone actually sees me. But in a way, what I'm hearing from you is you're feeling validated because someone finally just gave you permission to be sick, as opposed to you actually giving yourself that permission and assessing for yourself how you really are, and not feeling badly about it or not trying to justify everything that's going on for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very important point and a, a powerful piece. And it's interesting, like, so for in the same vein, right? So a woman will try to school her husband in a way to understand how important it is to behave like the friend is behaving. So when he's sick, she'll make sure to model that kind of behavior. So he knows what's important to do when someone is sick, right? And and that's beautiful, right? It's beautiful to be kind and loving and offer tea and, you know, tuck him in bed and do everything that you want to be doing to be nurturing. But if it's all coming from this place of teaching him what to do because he doesn't know how to do it, and it's really coming from a place of, I'm not justifying this for myself when I'm feeling sick and taking up that space for myself. So then it's ultimately just an element of, I don't know, I guess control.
Yeah. And not going to yield the results that you're looking for. So
Right.
it's not sincere and it's not wholesome. And then
Yeah.
it will just deepen the resentment, because then it's, oh, and compared to the way I show up for you when you're sick, look how you show up for me when I'm sick, right? Like,
Right.
how's that fair,
Right.
So it just fuels that fire.
Yeah. And then there's also the point where, and we've spoken about this so much before, but the idea of like, there's also, independent of all this, when you have a specific vision of what it looks like to be sick and what someone should do for you when you're sick, and he doesn't do exactly that, there's also that element, right? So maybe he's making supper and did carpool, but he didn't bring you a tea, right? So he actually didn't walk into your room a whole day, but he's been covering for you, right? Because of all the responsibilities that you have, but you still don't feel loved because that's not the way you treat someone who's sick. You make sure to send them a few texts. Do they need anything? Right? Like I could see for myself getting very stuck in like a vision of what it would look like to be nurturing. Fine, you're doing carpool and you're making supper, but like, duh, you have to do that. You also have to make sure to bring me tea, and it has to be the tea that I like, right? So there's also that element of wanting to make sure that he's doing it in the way that really makes you feel loved. And not that you shouldn't get that, right? And again, that goes back to the beginning of the conversation of, are we expressing our desires properly, and are we communicating what we want? Are we open to receiving him giving us things? But it also might look different because he is a different person and he has a different vision for nurture. And can I also shift the way I'm receiving this to receive it as love and care instead of something else?
Yeah, and if you can, which is a theme that hopefully everyone here is very familiar with, if you can expand to receive it the way that he is giving it, then obviously that's going to create more space for you to introduce maybe other elements that feel very significant to you, but not from a place of you're getting it wrong and you don't know how to be compassionate to somebody who's sick and why would you think that that was a good idea, but from a place of, wow, you do so much for me and you are showing up for me, and also it would be so meaningful to me if you checked in with me or if you brought me something or whatever it is that was your specific vision. Building from a place of, I already have a person who cares about me and shows up for me, and I also have the opportunity to communicate what feels meaningful to me in addition to that.
Obviously, a big call to ask someone to do all this while they're sick. So that's why it's important to think about these things, Baruch Hashem, in between those sick days. And nobody should ever, God forbid, get sick. And Mashiach should come and sickness should be a thing of the bygones. But if you do know that every now and then you're human and fall ill, hopefully this episode should empower you to examine some of these points and see what you can do to improve your relationship all around, and especially when you're sick.
Yeah, and release this issue as a pain point in your relationship. We would love to hear your feedback, thoughts, and questions.
Please leave a comment below or email us at yourrelationship@gmail.com.
Looking forward to connecting with you.
See you next time.